Today we're going to begin, and before I begin actually the officer-involved shooting explanations and cases, I want to mention the guilty verdict that was returned by a jury yesterday in a case handled by Deputy DA Michael Runyon that actually highlights just how dangerous the job of a police officer can be. The defendant was convicted of attempted murder in a shooting that seriously injured San Diego police officer Timothy Bell. And to highlight that, I'm going to read from today's Union Tribune an article by Dana Littlefield, which I think encapsulates just how quickly and how devastating these things can be. 74 seconds. That's how long it took for a dangerous confrontation to unfold between an ex-con on the run from authorities and the San Diego police officer who chased him into a large tunnel underneath a freeway in City Heights. The defendant led police on a high-speed chase through the densely populated neighborhood on October 24th of 2013 before abandoning the car, running through a canyon, and into the tunnel where the shooting occurred. The defendant showed that he was intending to kill the officer and resorted to deadly force almost immediately. Inside the dark tunnel, the defendant pulled the trigger 7 times. The officer, Bell, tried to reach for his own gun to return fire, but dropped it when he was actually shot, according to the testimony. He could still hear gunfire as he turned and ran to get out of harm's way. And as Michael Runyon said, if he hadn't run, he'd probably be dead. The officer was wounded in his abdomen, left arm, and left leg. He also had a grazing wound to one of his arms. So let me begin. At today's briefing, we'll be releasing 10 officer-involved shooting review letters and their associated videos. Any broadcast media that may be live streaming, or broadcasting this news conference live are advised that these videos contain graphic, violent content, and strong language that's not appropriate for a general audience. Once this press conference concludes, copies of the letters and the videos will be made available on flash drives at the back of the room. Based on the circumstances, the evidence, and the law, the district attorney's review shows the officer's decisions to shoot, and all of these incidents were reasonable, and they bear no criminal liability for their actions. The law, when it comes to these situations, gives officers the same self-defense and defense of others' rights that each of us has. Under California law, peace officers may use deadly force to protect themselves from the threat of death or great bodily injury. Officers also have additional rights because of the nature of their job. The law goes on to say that peace officers may use deadly force in the course of their duties under circumstances not available to members of the general public. The law further recognizes that police officers are often forced to make split-second decisions in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving. And that's exactly what the videos you'll see today show. Officers act without the benefit of hindsight or sitting in a room like we're doing right now and watching the video. I'd also like to point out some common themes we saw in all of these incidents. 10 incidents are being discussed, and we repeatedly saw when someone was shot by an officer or not fatally what occurred. In each and every one of these 10 incidents, the individuals failed to comply with the officer's commands. In 8 of 10 incidents, the individuals had substance abuse issues. In 7, individuals had drugs in their system at the time of the shooting. 7 of the 10 individuals also had documented mental health issues, and at least 3 of these incidents were suicide by cop. These commonalities are really telling and reinforce the need for a discussion about how to better help those who suffer from mental illness and substance abuse in San Diego County. Before we begin, a few reminders. I would note that these videos that we're showing are exempt under the California Public Records Act. Our decision to release them does not otherwise waive privilege, and we do not plan to release any additional evidence from the investigatory materials at this time and continue to claim all privileges we are entitled to under the law. As I mentioned, these videos can be graphic and disturbing to watch. Media outlets have responsibility for which portions of video are ultimately broadcast and posted and have a duty to put these in context. Presented out of context, a video clip alone can lead to an incorrect and sometimes inflammatory narrative about shootings. With context, video evidence can aid the public in understanding why and how an officer-involved shooting occurred and build trust in law enforcement. We are only releasing the videos that are relevant to the legal analysis regarding the shooting. In other words, the videos that show what happened in the moments leading up to the shooting. The videos are edited as follows. Faces of all the individuals are blurred out of respect for their privacy. In general, the video will stop once the individual who was shot is no longer an immediate threat and no more shots are being fired. We may sometimes circle weapons or positions of individuals so they may more clearly and identifiably show what was occurring. Otherwise, the videos are not edited. I'd also like to remind you again that the purpose of the District Attorney's review of officer-involved shooting cases is an independent review and to assure the public that peace officers in San Diego County are performing their duties in a legally justified manner. Our review does not examine such issues as compliance with the policies and procedures of any law enforcement agency, ways to improve training, or any issues related to civil liability. So let's begin with the first incident, the fatal shooting of Alberto Hernandez. Mr. Hernandez called 911 threatening to kill his female companion. Officers responded, knocking on Mr. Hernandez's front door. Hernandez opened the door, holding a pistol in his hand. A female was seen standing behind Hernandez. An officer told Hernandez to drop the gun. Hernandez quickly closed and locked the front door. Officers took cover, and Hernandez opened his front door multiple times, pointing the gun outward. Officers told Hernandez to drop the gun each time. Hernandez ultimately left his apartment and walked down the complex stairs, advancing on the officers with the gun in his hand. Officers continued to yell at Hernandez to drop his gun. Hernandez ignored the officers' repeated commands and pointed his gun at the officers. 3 officers opened fire, striking Hernandez several times. The incident was recorded by several officers' body-worn cameras and video from a police helicopter. You'll see the body-worn camera video from an officer who knocked on the door first, and then you'll see the suspect opening the door, holding a gun. Thank you. Then you'll see the Able helicopter video, followed by video from 2 other body-worn cameras. The second letter discusses the fatal shooting of Aaron Devanere. Mr. Devanere took his girlfriend hostage and forced her to drive a pickup truck while he rode as a passenger in the truck. Devanere called 911 and said he was armed with a handgun and a bomb. He threatened to hurt his girlfriend if officers tried to stop the truck. San Diego police officers pursued the truck into Escondido, where they flattened the truck's tires. Devonaire was not complying with the officers' repeated commands to get out of the truck. Devonaire placed his right arm around the hostage's head, who was screaming in fear, preventing her from leaving the truck. Believing Devonaire was going to kill the hostage, an officer fired one shot, killing Devonaire. There is video from Astria, the sheriff's helicopter, as well as a citizen's cell phone video. None of the officers were equipped with body-worn cameras at the time of this shooting. You'll see the helicopter video first, followed by the citizen cell phone video. Because a minor is heard on the cell phone video, we have altered their voice. The next incident is the fatal shooting of Jama Lo Day. Mr. Day threatened his brother, sister, and cousin with a knife, prompting the family to call 911. Officers arrived and were told by the family that they thought everyone was out of the apartment, but they couldn't be absolutely sure. Day could be seen inside, armed with a machete, a knife, and at times a metal rod. He had barricaded the door with pillows and a bicycle. Over the course of approximately 30 minutes, officers witnessed changes in Day's behavior and actions, moving from rational to irrational. Fearing for the safety of anyone who they believed might be inside the apartment with Day, officers formulated a plan to enter the apartment and arrest Day using less than lethal options. Officers kicked in the door and attempted to subdue with a taser, but they missed. A police dog was deployed as a less lethal option, but Day sliced the dog's back with a machete. He then swung the machete at an officer, striking him with the non-blade part of the weapon. 2 officers opened fire and struck Mr. Day multiple times. The incident was captured on several body-worn cameras inside and outside the apartment. We're providing 7 clips from 3 of the cameras that provide the best views of the actual incident. The clips also provide context leading up to the shooting. As the body-worn camera video shows, one officer is located outside the apartment, so audio of the shooting can be heard, but the video is obstructed. The other 2 videos are from the body-worn cameras of officers who enter the apartment, but again, the cameras do not capture the direct video images of the shooting. The next incident is the non-fatal shooting of Mr. Lance Tamio on August 6th, 2014 in Mission Bay Park. Camera crews from several local media outlets were present as this incident unfolded. Using the video they captured that day, the media has already really covered quite extensively this shooting. In fact, video taken by the media shows the incident better than the police helicopter video, which we are releasing today. Mr. Tamio called the San Diego Police Department from Mission Bay Park, said he had a gun and wanted to commit suicide. Officers arrived and made efforts to clear the park of several large groups of children and other members of the public. A police sergeant established contact and spoke with Mr. Tamio on his cell phone for about 15 minutes. Tamio got out of his car and began walking towards a pre-designated area. After he got about halfway, he suddenly stopped and returned to the car. Mr. Tamio then emerged from his car holding a handgun. He then walked towards the officers, pointing the gun at them. He also pointed the gun at the SDPD helicopter and officers several hundred feet away at the command post. Concerned for the safety of his fellow officers, members of the public, and himself, an officer fired one shot from his rifle, striking Mr. Tamio in the abdomen. Tamio was transported to the hospital. Mr. Tamio, who was battling a host of personal issues at the time, was later convicted of a felony and accepted full responsibility for his actions. Law enforcement is aware, we are aware, that Mr. Tamio has made admirable efforts towards his rehabilitation. He has his life back on track and is a contributing member of his community. His family would prefer, and we would prefer, that since the incident was widely covered at the time, the media recognize this and honor the family's wishes not to broadcast or post this video online. The video will be included on the flash drive that we're providing at the end of this briefing, but we're not going to screen it here this morning. The next incident is the non-fatal shooting of Jose Alberto Garcia. SWAT officers responded to a 911 call from Mr. Garcia's estranged wife, saying he was armed with a handgun and was demanding entry into their home. Officers arrived on the scene and attempted to negotiate with Mr. Garcia. During a prolonged standoff that lasted about an hour, Garcia pointed a handgun at officers and pulled the trigger, but the weapon misfired. Garcia racked another round of ammunition into the chamber and was shot multiple times by officers. He was transported to the hospital and survived his injuries. There's a dash cam video of this incident from a lengthy distance away, which does not show much. The video does, however, pick up several radio transmissions heard by the officers during the lengthy standoff, which lasted, again, about an hour. For context, we've collapsed the video, since it was an hour, to include police radio transmissions in a compressed timeline. There are wipes between each clip, and I think a wipe is something that shows you that it's been edited, indicating the edits. The portion of the video that includes the moments leading up to the shooting is unedited. After the initial shots are fired, you hear officers discussing the ongoing threat they reasonably believe Mr. Garcia posed, including his movements, which leads them to fire again. Mr. Garcia pled guilty to 2 counts of Penal Code section assault with a semi-automatic handgun on police officers and was sentenced to 8 years in state prison. The next officer-involved shooting incident is the fatal shooting of Timothy Smith. Mr. Smith ran when an officer tried to contact him on the street in Pacific Beach. He hid in a utility closet in a narrow passageway next to an apartment building. Officers were able to locate him and formed a perimeter. Many officers had their weapons drawn because they had been warned in lineup earlier that day and from ongoing communications that Smith was wanted on out-of-state warrants and was armed and dangerous. One of the officers responded to the scene with his police service dog. Mr. Smith ran out of the utility closet and began to climb over a fence. The dog bit him on the right foot, but Smith was able to get over the fence. Smith ran down the passageway on the other side of the fence. He hoisted himself up onto a secured gate and looked out into the back alley. Seeing numerous police officers in the alley, he climbed up onto the ledge of a condominium building. 3 officers had run down the narrow passageway on the other side of the fence, which was closed off by a fence at the end. Smith stood above the officers and was seen reaching into his pockets of his cargo shorts. Several officers shouted at Smith not to do that, but Smith continued to reach into his pockets. One officer fired at Smith because he feared Smith was reaching for a gun. Portions of the incident were captured on SDPD helicopter footage and by body-worn cameras filming from different angles. The video shows Smith reaching into his pockets and confirms the statements of the officers and civilian witnesses who said they saw Smith reach into his pockets. At one point, he pulled out an object out of his pocket and threw it. A warning that the language in some of these videos is graphic. Okay, the next OIS incident is the non-fatal shooting of Philip McMahon. The incident began when Mr. McMahon went to a residence in Mira Mesa, banged on the windows, and broke the glass in an attempt to enter the property. The homeowner was inside and called 911. An SDPD officer arrived and found McMahon naked, standing next to a window with broken glass at his feet. McMahon charged at the officer, tackled him, and attempted to take the officer's gun from his holster. The officer struggled to take McMahon into custody, and the officer's gun fell to the ground. Both men reached for the gun, but the officer was able to regain possession of it. Mr. McMahon continued attempts to take the officer's firearm. The officer fired one round, striking McMahon in the upper torso. McMahon was transported to the hospital and survived his injuries. He was arrested and ultimately pled guilty to resisting arrest by force and vandalism. The video of this incident is again from the police helicopter. The officers that were involved had not yet been issued body-worn cameras. The final incident that has video associated with it is the fatal shooting of Robert Hober. An employee of CVS drugstore called 911 to report that Mr. Hober had chased another employee while holding a box cutter. An SDPD officer responded to the store. Mr. Hober began walking quickly toward the officer before the officer had even exited his patrol car. Hober had a box cutter in his hand and was swinging his arm to his side and in front of him as he advanced on the officer. The officer backed away from Hober, taking at least 8 steps backward while shouting at Hober to put the knife down. At the same time, the officer extended his firearm in front of him. As Hober raised the box cutter over his head and continued to advance on the officer, Hober was shot twice. The incident unfolds very quickly in just 8 seconds and was captured on the officer's body-worn camera. There are 2 additional officer-involved shooting reviews that have been completed as well, but none of them have video associated with them. The first is the fatal shooting of Ton Nguyen. On the evening of July 2nd of last year, a woman and her husband called the police to report an assault. The suspect, later identified as Mr. Nguyen, approached the couple and kicked the husband. The callers feared Nguyen was mentally unstable. An officer recognized and responded to Nguyen as the suspect in a previous violent confrontation with the police. The officer went to Nguyen's residence to investigate the latest complaint. Nguyen opened the front door with a knife in his hand. The officer instructed Nguyen to drop his knife, but Nguyen ignored the officer's instructions and rushed forward towards him with the knife raised. The officer shot Nguyen once in the chest, and he was transported to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. The other incident with no video is the fatal shooting of Mr. Anthony Ashford. A Harbor Patrol officer was patrolling an area of North Harbor Drive when he saw Mr. Ashford peering into some of the unattended vehicles in a hotel parking lot. The officer greeted Ashford as he drove past him, but received no response. The officer got out of his marked vehicle and walked toward Ashford to determine whether he was engaging in criminal activity. The officer again greeted Mr. Ashford, but he ignored the officer and began to walk away. The officer stood behind Ashford and grasped his arm above the elbows to detain him. Ashford spun around, released himself from the officer's grasp. He grabbed the officer's pistol and tried to pull it from its holster. The two engaged in a struggle and both fell to the ground. Ashford gained control of the officer's taser and used it to stun the officer on the back of his neck. In his statement, the officer described the sensation of having electricity running through his body and then experiencing a convulsion. He said, "Then things went silent. It just went silent. I thought I got shot in the head." The officer recovered and was able to unholster his pistol and fire once, striking Ashford, who was pronounced dead at the scene. The officer was not equipped with a body-worn camera, as the Harbor Police Department did not use body-worn cameras at the time of this incident. So I realize that this has been a long briefing. Thank you for your patience. In addition to the videos, we're also providing you with copies of the 10 letters, which are much more detailed, that our office has delivered to each respective law enforcement agency, summarizing all the interviews and review and all the material that are contained in the evidence, and why we reached our conclusion not to file criminal charges. I encourage the media outlets to include these letters alongside any videos that they might post online. With this latest officer-involved shooting briefing, we are now caught up on the release of the letters that have been completed and their associated videos. There are 2 letters that have been completed but aren't being released at this time because they are connected to pending criminal cases against the individuals who were shot. By now you may be wondering about the status of the formalized policy regarding officer-involved shooting reviews. We're continuing. The policy is evolving after hearing feedback from the community, the media, and other groups. And the Police Chiefs and Sheriffs Association continues to work the draft and to craft the policy. And remember, the policy that we're drafting and the release of the videos is only involved in officer-involved shooting cases. And I'm looking forward to and hoping that the policy will be finalized soon.